We've spent a lot of time in this class so far talking about the record business. And we do that a lot at the ACM. A lot of people are interested in that. But I want you to know the business, the music business, is much bigger than just records. I didn't really get into doing singing on any records until much later in my career. I started out doing a lot of different other things, and so I want you guys to be aware of those opportunities, and those may be things that you can take advantage of. So let's talk about those for a second here. Here's a whole bunch of possible careers, all having to do with music and recording, and all of them are great, great careers. And you can spend your life doing a lot of the things that you love to do. So we've got live sound, sound design, video game music, film music, TV music, it goes on. Be aware of these things because hardly anybody stays in the record business for their entire career. They normally slide into one of these other things. I actually started in TV music and in commercials, and that's how I made my living for years and years and years. And it's a pretty great deal because when you record, you get paid, and I really like that. Anyway, I want you to think about these things, read this list over several times, and then hopefully, explore what the possibilities are. And if you have questions about any of this stuff, you can go ahead and email me. The last thing we're going to talk about, this was also in the book, but I'm going to go a little more specific. This is kind of where I spent most of my career. So motion picture and television music. So I wanted to talk about that. Film is classified by budget. Okay, so the thing you need to know is that some films cost $150 million, $200 million to make. Some are a couple $100,000 for a feature-length film. Sometimes less than that now. The cost of production has gone down. But what you need to know about film is that directors control the choices, including the music. Directors are they're responsible. Film is a director's medium. The director makes the bulk of the decisions. You have a producer that you work with. They are primarily the nuts and bolts handling the money thing. The director's job is making creative decisions. Sometimes in consultation with the producer, sometimes not, depending on who the director is. So as far as music, when you're talking about songs and other things, you have music supervisors that are hired to find the music and really to negotiate a lot of times the deals, the licensing deals for the master license and for sync licenses. Remember, master licenses are for the recordings. Sync licenses have to do with publishing. Now, the music supervisors make suggestions a lot of times. Some of them are very powerful and are given pretty much free rein. Just depends on who the director is. A lot of times directors will have relationships with their music supervisor, so whenever they get a film, they use the same music supervisor. Music supervisors are primarily concerned with the songs, really don't get into the score much, although some do. Next thing, editors or music editors can be your friends. So when a film is shot, the footage goes to an editor who starts editing and kind of a rough assembly of the film right away. A lot of times while the shooting is still going on, and then they may meet with the director even during shooting and say, hey, here's how I put this together. And in that process, you have a music editor, and the music editor is responsible for cutting up the music. It used to be physically cutting up the music on tape. Now it's more Pro Tools editing, and so if you're putting together the rough cut of the film, it can be very, very dry. The music editor, in combination with the editor, or sometimes just the editor, will take music and put it behind what they're cutting just to make it more interesting. And so when they show it, it has a little more perspective and context to the director and producer. The greatest thing that can happen is that somebody decides to take your music and use it as a temp dub behind the film while they're editing, because a lot of times these guys fall in love with it. They get used to seeing it with that music, and it's just not right unless that music is there. That's great if it's your music being temp dubbed in, and that's why I said editors or music editors can be your friends. The drag is if you are hired to write a song or trying to get your song in. A lot of times they've fallen in love with a temp dub, and we call this temp dubitis. And that makes it harder to get your song in. So the other thing that happens is these people do last minute substitutions. They can't get the rights to a certain song or a certain artist. It doesn't like the film, or whatever contractual things that they can't reach a negotiated thing. There are last minute substitutions, and sometimes if you have a relationship with a music editor, they have your music. When a situation like that comes up, they can go ahead and say, hey, I got this song, and slide it in, and kaboom, you're in the movie, which is great. Other things about film. The last thing done is the music on the film. So a lot of times that means they've already spent all the money or close to it, and a lot of times you're working on a deadline, an extreme deadline. In film, you can have a month or two to complete the score, but a lot of times it's less than that. So composers have a lot of sleepless nights, and they may have to compose the entire score, do the whole thing in a couple of weeks, or 3 weeks. So it can be pretty nutty, a pretty nutty existence. Directors are notorious for being obsessed with the visuals, kind of as they should be. And because of that, they'll spend extra money. I talked about that. Music budget can be nearly gone. Very little time. Talked about that. When it comes to TV, we're talking about time. TV is controlled by showrunners. They're called showrunners. They are the executive producer. Normally, when you see executive producer credit on the show, that is the showrunner. And they are almost always writers of the show as well, kind of a head writer of the show. And so they produce. Whereas film is a director's medium, television is a producer-writer medium. So time is crunched. There were times when I was working on Walker, Texas Ranger, or other shows where I would get a call at 6 p.m., and they'd say, hey, we need a song for the show. I'd go, great. They'd say, we got a messenger on the way over with a tape. It was done by tape at that point. And they'd send a tape over to my house, and they'd say, oh, by the way, we're dubbing at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. So I would get the tape, watch the tape, see what they needed. Start writing something, call the guitar player immediately and say, hey, can you be over here at 9? The guitar player gets over there at 9, lay down the guitars, and then I'm singing at 11. Then I do some sweetening, some MIDI sweetening and stuff. And there were a couple of times where I finished the song, mixed the song, didn't sleep all night, got up and was, over at the studio at 8 in the morning, handed them my, at that time on DAT or on CD, handed them the music with the start time, and just went home and collapsed. So that happens a lot. So time is crunched on television. So speed is imperative. You have to be fast at what you're doing, and people who work in television get working at that speed, and if they go and work at features, it just feels like a snail's pace because you're so used to working so fast. Almost all synth and samples, scores, TV scores that you hear, it may sound like an orchestra. Very rarely is it really an orchestra. They may have one violin, solo instruments that they bring in. They have guitar players that'll come in and play on stuff. But for the most part, All that stuff that you hear that sounds orchestral is actually done with synths and samples. And the money has dropped on what you get paid on television. It's very sad. But there's just so much more competition out there. And the other thing is that TV shows used to play twice a year. You do 22 episodes. It would play, twice a year, once in the fall and once in the spring or summer. That's done. So, when you're relying on ASCAP and BMI performance money for the bulk of your income, and they only play the show once, that's not as cool. Luckily, with syndication, and if you've got a show on cable, they pretty much play those, until they wear them out. So there can be a really good back end. Sorry. What's the job of a composer? The job of the composer is to complete the vision of the director-producer. Going to say that again. The job of the composer is to complete the vision of the director/producer, depending if it's film or television. Why is this important to understand? There's a lot of people, a lot of young composers that I talk to, and they're feeling, I'm going to come up with this great music. I'm going to be inspired. Most of the time, the director has a very specific idea of what they want. They hardly ever say, hey, go write what you want to write. That's wonderful. They will play you what they have temp dubbed, or they'll say, I want a John Williams type score, or I want this type of score. And your job is to take that template of sound and then create a sound. So you're constantly talking to the director, if it's a film, and saying, what are you looking for? How can I make this work? Is there a song? And I often do this when I'm working with folks is, what are you hearing? Give me an artist. Give me so it gives me a template of where to come from. So I'm starting much closer to what they want. And it's just really important to do that. And a lot of times it's those temp dubs that I talked about that are your guide. The job of composer is very mathematical. You are sitting there cutting up music, basically. So you may have a theme, but when you put it against picture, the way things hit, the way the visuals hit, and the things you want to hit in the visuals, you have to put in a 5/4 bar or a 3/4 bar, or just the way it hits, you push a beat here or there. And so a lot of times you have to sit there and work out that math. Should I make it, a 3/4 bar in, kind of this odd way? I'm going to make this work in here, or do I just make it a push or something within a regular 4/4 tempo or something? So it's mathematical, and you have to be able to do that and figure out where those hits and where those things come. It is long hours for short spurts of time, which means, like I was talking about, you don't get to sleep sometimes. You will work your fanny off for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then you'll have 2 weeks off. And those 3 weeks, you're barely sleeping. There's many stories of composers sleeping under their boards, the mixing board, catching a cat nap, for a couple hours and then getting back up. You are in a dark studio. You lose total perception of whether it's day or night. You barely see your wife or family. It's kind of crazy. And then you get long periods of time, hopefully not too long, but a period of time where you're off and you get to kind of catch up and do it. So I enjoy working that way. And I know other people do too. But if you don't like doing that, if you like having just a steady thing where you're just kind of doing it, composing is probably not the deal for you. There is intense competition. The technology has allowed everybody to be a composer. It used to be an apprentice system. You would start out, you would get somebody's coffee, but you became an arranger for somebody else. You would, they would scribble out a melody and say, I want this, with the orchestra, I want this. And you would take it and take their sketch and transfer it and make it into a score. And then hopefully you meet people over the course of time, and either that composer moves on, you move on from that composer, you develop a relationship with an associate producer or somebody else, and an opportunity presents itself, and you get to move into the composer's chair. That's over. People come out of college and they have a full rig with all the samples. So the competition is intense. The money, I'm trying to remember, I think it was Daily Variety said that composers today are making 17% of what they made in the early 90s. Wow. That's not a great number, but on the other hand, there's more need for music, so there's more opportunities. So, you got to weigh it, and if you love it and this is what you want to do, you just accept that is the reality. The other thing you have to know is that everyone meddles in what you're doing. You get a lot of opinions. It's a TV show I worked on where the composer, and I've got his name there, Jack Redford. It was a show called St. Elsewhere, and we were recording an orchestra, and they were doing Bach's B minor Mass. It was what they call source cue, just music coming out of the radio. So they were basically just recording, this classical work, and the associate producer on the show said, "You know what? I don't like the string line. It's Bach." So anyway, the composer had to go in and rewrite the string line, rewrite Bach, which caused kind of a row with the musicians. It was, pretty funny. But that's just an extreme example of how you have a lot of people doing it. So you're completing the vision of the director or the producer. Always remember that. It's always the joke in the record business and the whole music business, do art on your own time. Guys go and play jazz at night, but during the day they're making a living. They get to make a living playing music, and that's wonderful, but you got to understand that. And in most cases, publishing is off the table. So if you are a work for hire, so the studio will own the publishing on whatever you write. You get the writer's share as far as ASCAP and BMI is concerned, but they will keep the publisher's share. I've only known one composer on a TV show, and that was Mike Post, who had a deal where he got half the publishing. That's the only guy I've ever heard of as far as doing score who kept his own publishing. And it was an insane thing that he was able to get that. So that's it when it comes to the composer. Job of a songwriter in film and television is, again, to complete the vision of the director, producer. I'm going to say that again. Job of the songwriter is to complete the vision of the director and or producer. So you are trying to make them happy. That is the thing. Whatever they have in their head, you're trying to figure that out, and you're trying to create a song that works for that. Again, it's mathematical. You are trying to make the tempo of the song kind of fit with the cuts in the show. So you got to be aware of pacing and trying to hit certain emotional moments at the right time. There is a short turnaround almost always with this. It seems music is left to the last minute, so they may send out something, hey, we need a theme song for this movie, this TV show, and you got about 2 days to get it all done, get it recorded and get it in. And it's a business of heat, what's hot. And so sometimes, what they'll do is there's a name in the trades of an artist that is super hot right now, lighting it up. Whether it's Lorde would be one right now, and they go, "Ooh, that's what we want. That's what we want. We want that." And so your job is to try to create that for them. And you may lose the job because they'll go ahead and hire Lorde and pay a ton of money because they want to be close to that heat, what's hot, the buzz. So you got to know that a lot of times it's not about your talent, it's not about your song, it's about them following the heat and what's hot. Um, and again, there will be a lot of meddling. They may want to change a lyric even after the song is recorded. They may want to do this. Somebody may want, they may come up with a song title and they want a piece of the ASCAP. They want to get writer's credit as well and sharing that money. That's a decision you have to make if you want to do that, but it happens a lot. So just know that that's the business. That's how it works when you're working in film and television. But it is I loved it. I love it still when I get a chance to do it. And so it's a great way to make a living, and you're not on the road as much and you're not doing that kind of stuff. So that's it when it comes to songwriting.